Moshe Katri, MD of Equity Research of IT Services and Payments at Wedbush Securities. Hi Moshe, good morning. Thanks for joining, or rather good evening. How are you feeling about this quarter? Are we in for disappointment? Are we in for a surprise? What would we gear up for? How would you view the Indian IT sector this quarter?
In general, the sentiment is probably a bit more positive. A lot of this is a function of the fact that you have a new administration that's coming in. They're probably going to be a bit more business friendly. So the sentiment is important here. The quarter should be fine. And obviously, you have some recent movements on the FX side that should help margins. These are going to be tailwinds for margins. That's going to be a positive. But you're dealing with other things, right? There's some debate about H-1B visa programs. What does that mean for the sector? Are we gonna go through a cap? That could be an issue down the road. The macro itself remains pretty fluid, right? In terms of economic activity, the policy of the new administration. So, as you said, there are a lot of different factors that you really have to kind of incorporate into the sector to kind of get a feel on what happens during the next 6 to 12 months. But I would say net, despite this fluid kind of situation, I would say, compared to last year, we seem to be in better shape in terms of pipeline activity, focus on discretionary spend. These should be, I would say, favorable for the next 6 to 12 months.
Anticipation then for the quarter ahead, because for now, going through all the reports that we've seen so far, it seems like it's going to be a mixed bag. So on one hand, you have a persistent, you have an HCL Tech persistent. It seems like they are going to lead actually on the sequential growth front, but you have Wipro that could be a laggard. You have guidance on HCL Techs that could be up, but Infy on the other hand could lower guidance. How are you splitting the basket?
Well, first of all, you can't really bundle all of them together because they're a bit different. I would say companies that have more exposure to discretionary spending will probably continue to struggle. Companies that are able to process and ramp a lot of the cost takeout deals should be fine. So I think, a lot of this really depends on the mix of revenues. The mix of revenues, the revenues that are coming in from the different verticals. The last thing you want to do is bundle them together. So each company is going to have its own thing to kind of focus on. But net, again, remember the December and March quarters tend to be seasonally weak for the sector. I would say the focus will be on guidance. Guidance is going to be a big deal. General commentary about the environment, that's what everyone's really going to be focusing on at this point. And the background of all this, you have Accenture that reported numbers a couple of weeks ago. They raised guidance. So that's kind of the backdrop here.
Moshe, hi, good morning from where we're sitting, of course. Just trying to understand how you were seeing some of the biggest players specifically, and you made a valid point that we need to look at these companies individually. So if I asked you to raise or down a little bit on, say, a TCS, because TCS reports tomorrow, let's start there, and then a Wipro and Infosys, what would you be looking out for in each of these?
In my view, the tier one offshore vendors are in a pretty decent shape, just given the fact that they have a significant amount of exposure to cost takeouts. The pipeline has been looking pretty good, with the exception of Wipro. And in general, we've seen peak number of deals that came through the pipeline, and these have been ramping. So these should help sequential growth. That's number one. Number two, as I said, you have the margin tailwinds coming in from FX. So that should also help. So that's why I'm not really worried about the quarter. The real question here is what management teams are going to say about, the general kind of spending environment, what clients are telling them. Where are we in the budget cycle? Are budgets going to be on time? Are we going to see some delays? That will be kind of an interesting data point or data points that will give us a good feel on what happens during the next 6 to 12 months. So I'm less focused about the quarter, and I'm more focused about the general kind of commentary and the demand metrics that the companies will be talking about. And I wouldn't be surprised if, in general, the sentiment is going to be relatively positive.
just on that point about FX tailwinds, and if you look at the Accenture numbers also, that was a big part of it. Of course, the outlook was getting a little better. Do you see that now as a positive booster continuing into the next couple of quarters? You said that's the padding that we have for this quarter, but how far do you see that advantage continuing?
Well, first of all, not all of it's is gonna get passed through in terms of profitability. I'm assuming what we've seen in the past is companies will be taking some of that profitability and reinvest it in the infrastructure and in people in general. So, historically, management teams have been very disciplined in terms of what to do with the incremental profits from FX. So I don't think you're going to see this being passed through totally, and you'll see a pretty good mix of reinvesting in the business versus, seeing that in better profitability for the sector.
Moshe, good evening. I was wondering when I talk to management, should I ask them about whether budgets are getting finalized in January, or will companies in the US in particular take the decision post Trump swearing in and some glimpses of what the first 10-15 days do? Could it be a possibility that what usually used to happen, presumably in Jan or by the first week of Feb, could get delayed a little bit to maybe mid-Feb or end Feb in terms of clients finalizing the budgets because of this January 20th event? And could that kind of impact the year-on-year growth that IT companies could show, either in terms of reported numbers or in terms of the commentary for Q4?
That's a great point. And in fact, we've seen budget delays for the past 2 years consistently because of that uncertainty. Now, the real question here is whether management teams are going to feel comfortable enough that, as I said, this seems to be a more business-friendly administration, that you'll see budgets ready this time. I would say 50-50 in terms of that probability, right? So that's something that we're always looking at.
Just one last point, Moshe. We talked a bit about commentary on business outlook, but we've avoided the elephant in the room, or the big T in the room. Your take on what a Trump administration is actually going to mean for Indian IT? There's a sort of mixed view out there. Wondering what you think.
I think you have elements within the administration that will be pretty much leaning towards, leaving the H-1B visa program as is, just because internally in the US, we do believe that there is a need for skilled labor. So I don't think they're going to do anything to impact that. And I think in general, if you have a more business-friendly administration, this will be, I would say, a positive in general for spending. IT services spending, tech spending, discretionary spending. Remember, we've had 2 very tough years on the discretionary spending front. I'm not suggesting that we're going to go back to where we were during the pandemic in terms of peak levels, but it seems that we're headed towards, I would say, a better picture for that, or a better scenario in terms of spending.
All right, thank you so much for that, Moshe Katri there. Always a pleasure to speak with you.